Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, All That Jazz. So I'm back again with another unexpected horror video. I was recently watching an interview with Brad Dourif, Fiona Dourif, and Alex Vincent talking about Child's Play and the new movie Don Mancini's got planned next. And while I was scrolling through YouTube, I saw a thumbnail for something I had never seen before, the Doc of Chucky. A documentary I have genuinely never heard before. So naturally, I went and watched the whole thing. And that's what got me thinking about all of this. What else could Don Mancini possibly do to bring Chucky back? And then it dawned on me. Maybe it's going back to what made Child's Play work in the first place. Which then made me realize Chucky has to be the next horror icon I talk about on my channel. Now, if you are new here, I've been deep in horror icon chatter lately, breaking down everything I hope Crystal Lake gets right, who should be the next Freddy Krueger, and why Halloween should just let Laurie go. So definitely check those out if you haven't already. Now, back to Chucky. Out of every horror icon I grew up with, Chucky is actually the first one I can remember being genuinely scared of. And when I mean genuinely scared, I mean scared to the point where I would have to sleep in the bed with my parents after watching, especially that first movie. It wasn't Michael Myers, it wasn't Jason, it wasn't Freddy. It was this little good guy doll that somehow terrified me the most. And I always wondered why that was. And now that I get older, I think it's exactly because Chucky never cared who you were. Adults, teenagers, kids, nobody was off limits. And ironically, that's the version of Chucky I miss the most. Somewhere along the way, Child's Play stopped trying to be scary and started trying to entertain us instead. And honestly, you can see that happen just by looking at the titles. Child's Play, Child's Play 2, Child's Play 3. Then suddenly, it's Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, Curse of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, 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 Chucky. The first three titles are all about this game that Chucky is playing with someone else's life. He's the villain invading someone else's story. After part 3, the franchise literally becomes about him. And that's not accidental. Chucky stopped being the monster and became the main character, the main protagonist. And this just isn't my theory. After finishing the Doc of Chucky, Don Mancini confirms it himself. After the third movie, he wanted to do something different, and that meant centering the story around Chucky instead of the family he's terrorizing. He even explains that Chucky became more popular, the mindset became, let's show him more. And that's exactly the moment where I think the franchise lost the plot. Now, I do want to give Don Mancini his flowers because in my opinion, he's kept Chucky forever evolving more than any other slasher franchise. But somewhere along the way, the focus shifted. He's gone from being a serial killer trapped inside of a doll to having a wife, kids, extended mythology, and an entire ongoing family saga. At what point does it stop feeling like Child's Play? Somewhere along the way, the franchise stopped being Child's Play and started trying to make Chucky bigger than the story itself. So, for me, here's what I would want Don Mancini to do moving forward to bring that feeling back, to bring Child's Play back. Number 1, make Chucky scary again. This is the biggest one, and honestly, everything else on this list depends on this. I don't want to spend the movie rooting for Chucky or seeing a movie centered around Chucky. I want to dread every time he shows up. I want to feel the suspense. Like I don't want a movie where start to finish it's all about Chucky. Put him back in the shadows. If you go back and watch the original Child's Play, that's exactly how the movie treats him. Chucky isn't in our face whatsoever. In fact, they do a very good job with alluding to this doll being the actual killer for the first half of the movie. When we finally get the reveal of him coming to life in Karen's hand, it's so well done, it adds much more suspense because we didn't spend this first half of the movie seeing Chucky alive and committing these murders. That's Chucky at his absolute scariest to me. Not because he's doing anything over the top, but because of everything the movie does before that moment. The suspense, the uncertainty, the slow realization that something is terribly wrong. That's what made him terrifying. That fear only works if Chucky is the true villain, not an anti hero, not someone we're supposed to cheer for, not the guy with the funny one liners or a doll where that's all we see the entire movie. Every sequel doesn't need a bigger twist or crazier mythology. Sometimes smaller is scarier. Give me a Chucky who's cruel, unpredictable, and genuinely frightening, not a Chucky who's constantly trying to top his own highlight reel. And to be fair to Don, he actually proved he could still do that. Curse of Chucky did understand this to an extent. Chucky isn't shoved in our face from the opening scene. The movie lets the mystery build. For a while, it genuinely feels like we're getting the scary Chucky back. Where I think it falls apart again is Cult of Chucky, and even more so in the TV series. The tone starts shifting back towards spectacle, and that's the other issue. The original trilogy definitely had its funny moments. Brad Dourif has always been hilarious as Chucky with his one-liners, but the comedy was there to relieve the tension, not to replace it. Starting around Bride, and especially in Seed, that balance flips. Instead of horror having moments of comedy, it becomes comedy with moments of horror. It starts feeling less like Don is trying to scare us and more like he's trying to outdo whatever crazy thing Chucky did the last time. And that's exactly how you slowly turn one of horror's greatest villains into a punchline. 2. Give us the emotional stakes back. This is probably the most overlooked reason the original movie still works so well. Karen isn't just the mom. She's a widowed single mother trying to give her son a good birthday. All Andy wants is this good guy doll. It's a simple setup, but it's relatable. She's just trying to make her kid happy. Then everything falls apart. She loses her best friend. She watches her son's behavior completely change overnight. Nobody believes either of them. You can feel her desperation when she's begging Detective Norris to listen. You feel her fear when she finally realizes Andy was telling the truth from the beginning. And Andy, those scenes when he's begging the psychiatrist to believe him still hit, and they break my heart every time I watch. He's not just scared of Chucky. He's scared because every adult thinks he's lying. He's completely alone. That gives the horror its emotional weight. If we don't care about the people Chucky is tormenting, then the scares don't matter nearly as much. The horror only works because we have something worth protecting. That's something the later movies often lose. Think about Curse of Chucky. Nika is an excellent protagonist, and Fiona Dourif gives a fantastic performance. But outside of Nika, most of the family feels more defined by the drama than their relationships. We're told about their problems, but we don't spend enough time caring about them before Chucky starts picking them off. And that's why, for me, Alice's fate in Cult of Chucky doesn't land the way Andy's story does in the original. It's tragic on paper, but emotionally it never hits with the same force because the series never built the same connection with her or her family. Backstory alone isn't emotional stakes. We have to genuinely care about the people Chucky is destroying. When we do, every kill matters. Every close call becomes more suspenseful, and every victory feels earned. 3. Bring back the original look and practical effects. Now, while I do think Curse and even parts of Cult lean back into the horror more than Bride or Seed, there's one thing that keeps pulling me out of those movies, and that's the look of the actual doll. Chucky doesn't look like Chucky anymore. In Cult of Chucky especially, he looks too smooth, too clean, too digital. Part of what made the original doll so unsettling was that he actually looked like a toy that had been through something. He had scratches, scuffs, little imperfections that made him look real. him changing and transforming into a human the more he stayed inside of this doll's body, and his eyes transitioning and changing to more into the color and the translucent look of Brad's eyes by the end of the movie. I loved absolutely all of that. We need to go back to that. Now, another thing that I did learn by watching the documentary of Chucky was that after the Seed of Chucky underperformed, Universal got rid of the original movie molds. So when Curse went into production, they had to completely build Chucky from scratch. So that's a huge reason why his appearance keeps changing from movie to movie. If Don really wants this next movie to feel like we're going back to the basics, I'd love to see Kevin Yeager involved again. He is the special effects artist who designed and built the original Chucky doll for the 1988 film and continued to work with Don until The Bride of Chucky. I mean, come on now. How cool would it be if one of the people responsible for creating Chucky helped bring him back to where he first started? That would be a genuine full circle moment for the franchise. And this is not an attack on Tony Gardner either. For any of you who don't know, Tony took over for the franchise starting with Seed of Chucky. Because Yeager owned his original design sketches, Gardner couldn't simply copy them exactly due to intellectual property boundaries, so he had to reverse engineer the looks using VHS frozen frames and created a new sculpt from scratch, right? So his approach was more so prioritizing making the doll lighter and faster to operate on set versus Yeager's approach. He built a heavier mechanical complex frame inside the doll's head. This gave the latex skin realistic tension, letting Chucky sneer, furrow of his brow, and the micro expressions like the human face more prominent. So yeah, that's just my personal preference. For me, I think I like the look of Chucky that Kevin Yeager designed in the first 4 films in comparison to what Tony Gardner designed from the 5th film to the present. 4. Keep the story and the mythology simple. Now, when I say bring back simplicity, yes, part of that is one doll, one killer. But more than that, I mean a simple storyline and mythology the way the original trilogy had. One doll, one killer, one terrifying story. That's it. I don't want to see a Cult of Chucky situation where he's splitting into multiple personalities, or we have multiple dolls, or he's jumping into other people's bodies. I don't need to see another pregnant doll or the birth of another killer like we got in The Bride and the Seed of Chucky. Every time the story adds on another layer like that, it stops being scary and starts being a spectacle. I am done seeing Chucky being a joke and a spectacle. It's gotten to the point where a lot of people don't even consider Chucky a horror icon or a slasher icon just by how far we've gotten from the original film. And I think if Don wants to bring Chucky back, he needs to go back to Child's Play and the simplicity that mythology had in the original 3 films. 5. Stop using characters as extensions of Chucky's story. This one is probably the most frustrating because I actually think the franchise has created some great characters, Nika Pierce being the most recent. When Curse of Chucky introduced Nika, she was one of the best things to happen to the franchise in years. Fiona Dorff was incredible in the role because Nika felt like a real person. She wasn't just the next victim. She was someone who had her own struggles, her own insecurities, and her own life outside of Chucky before he was even introduced. This is why her story worked. But somewhere along the way, the franchise stopped asking what was best for Nika and her story and started asking, how can we connect Nika even more with Chucky? And that's where I think the story starts going off the rails, because Nika didn't really need to become another extension of Charles Lee Ray's story. And I also wonder, did they incorporate that just because Fiona is Brad's daughter? But I personally just feel she didn't need to be possessed by Chucky. She didn't need to become another way for Chucky to continue existing. And let me also add, some of the things that happened to her felt less like meaningful character development and more like the franchise trying to find new ways to punish the character. By the time we get to the TV series, Nika has gone through so much that it's starting to become difficult to even take seriously. I mean, at this point, she was already in the chair. Now she's in the chair and she no longer has fucking legs and she doesn't have any arms at this point. So what was the reason? This character was already introduced as someone with a physical disability. Her story was already about overcoming people underestimating her and fighting to have control over her own life and her own body. But instead of building on that, Don decided to keep adding more and more tragedy onto her. Possession, losing control of her body, losing parts of herself, even losing her fucking limbs. At some point, it stops feeling like horror and it starts feeling like the writers are asking, how much worse can we make Nika's life? And that's the problem. Tragedy really only works when it serves a character and it is pushing them or their storyline or their character development forward even more in the story. When it tells us something about who they are. But when every new installment has an added shocking twist, another injury, another connection to Chucky, it starts feeling less emotional and more ridiculous. I'm sorry, that's just what it gives now. Her character feels ridiculous. And to me, that's the biggest difference between the original movies and where the franchise is now. Andy and Karen worked because Chucky entered their story. He was threatening her son's life, right? But over time, it feels like the characters have been rewritten to serve Chucky's story instead. And to me, that's backwards. Chucky is his scariest when he's invading someone else's world, not when everyone else exists just to expand his. The franchise doesn't need more ways to connect characters to Chucky. It needs to create characters who are interesting enough that we care what happens when Chucky shows up. The question shouldn't be, how can we make this character suffer more because Chucky's here? What the question should be is, what does Chucky do to someone who already has something worth losing? That's where the fear comes in. 6. Bring back legacy characters and finally close out Andy's story. And finally, I think the biggest thing this franchise needs is to bring back the characters that made us care in the first place. If we are talking about bringing back Child's Play, then we need to go back to the story that started everything, Andy Barkley. Andy is the heart of this franchise. Everything started because a kid got a good guy doll for his birthday and that doll turned out to be a killer. We watched Andy lose his childhood because of Chucky. We watched him go from an innocent kid that nobody believed to someone who spent his entire life with the trauma Chucky left behind. And after nearly 40 years, I think it's time to finally give Andy a real ending. Not just a cameo, not just another appearance, a true conclusion to his story. And honestly, one of the biggest missed opportunities in this franchise has been Karen Barkley, Andy's mother, the person who started this entire journey, the person who went from thinking her son was lying to realizing he was telling the truth and fighting to protect him. That relationship has the emotional foundation of the original Child's Play. And the fact that Karen has been gone for so long is one of the biggest fumbles the franchise has made. Bringing her back wouldn't just be nostalgia. It would actually mean something. Seeing Andy and Karen together after everything they survived would give the franchise the emotional payoff it's been missing. And this is also why I think the TV series should be allowed to exist as its own separate thing. Not every story needs to connect. Not every character needs to continue in every version of the franchise. Sometimes trying to connect everything together actually makes the story even weaker. The movie should be able to focus on the story that the franchise started. Andy, Karen, and Chucky. The story that deserves a conclusion. I don't need a movie to keep expanding every corner of this universe. I don't need any more connections. I don't need endless mythology. And honestly, I don't need to see any more of Glenn or Glenda either. Let the show be its own separate thing. Let the movies focus on closing the chapter that began in 1988. Because after all of these years, the question shouldn't be, how do we keep Chucky going forever? The question should be, what is the final story worth telling? Or better yet, whose story is worth telling? And I think the answer has been here from the beginning. A mother, a son, a killer doll, and one final chance to end where it all started years ago. At the end of the day, I don't think the correct answer is to erase everything that came after the original Child's Play. There are a lot of things worth celebrating. Don Mancini created one of the most unique horror franchises ever, and the fact that Chucky is still relevant nearly 40 years later is a testament to how special the character is. But I do think the franchise has reached a point where it needs to remember what people fell in love with in the first place. Because Child's Play was never just about Chucky, it was about Andy, it was about Karen, it was about a family trying to convince the world that something impossible was happening. It was about taking something innocent, a child's toy, and turning it into something more terrifying. And that's the version of Chucky I want to see again. Not bigger, not more complicated, not another attempt to expand the universe. Just a genuinely scary toy with characters we care about. Because sometimes the best way to move forward is to remember where it all started. I don't want Chucky to disappear. I want Child's Play to come back. I want that feeling of watching the original movie for the first time. That feeling of looking at the good guy doll and thinking, something just isn't right about that thing. That's the magic this franchise had, and I think it's still there. It just needs to be found again. Now, if you have made it this far in the video, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I seriously appreciate you taking 20 minutes out of your day to listen and to spend some time with me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you are a returning viewer, as always, thank you so much for your continued support. Please remember, every interaction, every like, every comment, every time you click or share on a video, it helps push these videos out and it helps smaller channels like mine continue to grow. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think? What do you think Child's Play needs to bring Chucky back? Do you want to see the franchise continue expanding the universe, or do you think it's time to go back to the basics? Let me know in the comments. As always, stay curious and stay out the upside down. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.